We're a large nation. We have to also realize that,
Very.
right? So we'll take time to be a large product nation, but in parts, we definitely are.
A lady said, I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can focus on literature and writing. But today, AI is actually doing literature and writing, and I am ending up doing only laundry and dishes.
We have very high expectations for ourselves, which is very good. But sometimes with high expectations also end up having lower patience. In this high expectation, low patience race, sometimes long-term objectives take a backseat.
Today, if I'm an engineer passing out, how should I be looking at my career?
They need to be really smart about what cards they want to kind of play.
One of the questions that we keep asking, deep tech investments कहाँ हो रहा है, कौन कर रहे हैं और हम कर रहे हैं या नहीं as a country. Today, this conversation is a must watch for everyone who's looking for deep tech investments. And if you're building a startup and looking for investments, and also to understand what is happening in the AI space, what is happening in the deep tech space, what are some of the advantages in the space, what does it take for a startup to actually build a global deep tech venture from India. Join me in conversation with Vishesh Rajaram, a brilliant investor from Chennai with his deep tech fund called Special Invest, and Prabhu R, co-founder of M2P, again a phenomenal banking tech platform they have built, which is used by some of the top banks in the country, and they have taken this technology to the world. I have with me Vishesh, who is behind Special Invest, and he is the deep tech investor. He's actually invested in a lot of companies who are doing deep tech work. And Prabhu, an entrepreneur, a deep thinker, building a fantastic, phenomenal company, M2P, which all of us should know about, and also someone who's deeply invested in AI. What should we do to further India's AI agenda, AI story?
I think AI, even before we come to AI, what we should actually think of is like, are we a product country? That's a question that we need to ask ourselves, like not just in software, take any product for that matter. We need to start, like, I think automobile is catching up slowly. Our automobile product as a unit has really started punching to its weight. It's not the lack of engineering or lack of depth or lack of capability. It is always about packaging the whole product into a global phenomenon, right? That's where we are lacking, like probably the final flourish or whatever you may call it. We lack the nuance to ensure that the product is world class. Okay. And this not just like automobile, yes, it is kind of really, the Tatas and Mahindras have really poured in a lot of R&D dollars, and that's the actual point that is lacking everywhere in every industry. The amount of money that we as a country invest in R&D, that's definitely a big question mark. Because global average is like anywhere above 2% of the country's GDP is generally poured into R&D. China, US, Korea, you name any country that is actually advanced in terms of product capabilities, they have a very, very solid R&D plan. That's where we lack. I wonder whether we even have about 1% of our GDP poured into R&D by various companies, like not just the state. I'm talking about the companies and conglomerates put together. Not many companies I have heard of who have spent more than 2% in R&D for sure, right? So that is one of the most important factor why we are not being a product country. We are very good in services, from hospitality to software to anything that you can take. Like we are great in terms of servicing, but the same might is not seen in product. That's because one, we look at immediate results sometimes. We, if it is a public company, we always measure the company from quarter to quarter, not like in the long run, what did they do or accomplish over time. And the second aspect is our mentality is to be happy with whatever we have got. Okay, we don't push ourselves beyond the limit or try to punch above our weight in certain areas. I think when you build products, you need to be crazy. You need to be really like what Steve Jobs did, right? He always pushed the envelope, always tried to do something that is beyond extraordinary, right? We don't push ourselves to that limit. It's not like we cannot. It's just that patience where till the time you get something that is really world class and really, like, even if people are not noticing, trying to actually go for the like full Monty in terms of depth and maturity of a product, we need to push there. That's when we will start getting good product outcomes. Software, which is our industry, if you look in the last decade or so, the real software platform or a product which attained global scale, other than Postman, I'm a developer myself, other than Postman, I couldn't actually name one product which has attained global scale as a software, right? Think of the Microsofts and Googles of the world. Why like every time somebody asks, right, why doesn't India having like 500,000 software engineers generated every year? Why are we not building a company? Why have we not built a company like Google or Microsoft in the last 30, 40 years? Right? So that's a question that we need to ask deeply. Probably the second aspect is around culture, which I touched upon briefly, but we should actually be tolerant to failure.
Yeah.
We are not fault tolerant. We are like always, we expect things to fall in place all the time as a society. If you look at a kid passing out of any like graduating out of any college, you inform the parents that your kid is wanting to kind of start up in the domain that he or she is like studying in, they are really worried. They're okay, very happy if the kid is placed in a job.
Yeah.
Right? The entrepreneurship mindset is not just, we should not push the kids to have the entrepreneurship mindset.
So is it also because we are a very middle class or lower middle class economy and there's always this worry
Probably.
कि पैसा बनाना है या salary कमाना
We are always on the what do you call, like we try
hand to mouth
push
in a
ourselves.
way.
Yes, to push ourselves to settle sooner and all that. I don't know what settle means, but that's what most people want to, right? Like in their 30s, they want to be having a house, having a car, and all these things. They think it is settling. But I would say it's okay to be unsettled for a long time. But if you're able to create something that is generational, that's very important.
Vishesh, what do you have to say?
No, I think there are some very important points that came out. Tolerance, patience, wealth creation. I think my whole view is we're still a very young country, right? I think post-liberalization, which was in the 90s, 30 years, we have very high expectations for ourselves, which is very good. But sometimes with high expectations also end up having lower patience. And therefore, in this high expectation, low patience race, sometimes long-term objectives take a backseat, right?
Yeah.
Which is sort of how I would rationalize inadequate R&D spend or inadequate investments in the world of R&D from the venture capital world. I think it'll change. I think it's beginning to change already, right? Most of our investors in our funds are family offices from the country and entrepreneurs from the country that have made wealth. And it's very interesting to note that they're willing to back a strategy which from outside looks very binary. Because they're realizing that maybe the timing is now to sort of commit to putting capital for R&D, for putting capital to help put India on the map. That's one side to it. I think the other side to it, which is the inside out view of how just venture capital, which by the way is an even more recent industry, right? I mean, if you go back in history, venture capital came in the 90s thanks to World Bank, but true blue venture capital is again a 20-year-old phenomenon, not that old, right? Most of us, the oldest of us, I've been in the business since 2007, it's about 17, 18 years of vintage. And by nature, you end up doing what works and what you're good at. It's just human tendency. And therefore, the first two waves have all been about e-commerce, commerce, opening up of the internet, and then opening up of the economy from a consumption standpoint, which means fintech and consumer. And therefore, most VCs have seen that work. And that's a large market. So it's very hard to question their motivation to do something else. I mean, I can empathize on why a lot more capital goes into consumer and fintech as a category. Nothing wrong about it, right? It's creating value clearly. But I also think investing in science and tech needs a very different mindset. Because the patience there, the risk there is fundamentally very different from how would you do this, right? So I think there will be a new breed of VCs that will pursue this and try and build this out. And I don't think they'll be comparable in scale, and they shouldn't be. And it isn't in any other part of the world, right? If you see North America or you see Japan, there are deep tech investors, their size are very different from the other investors, and that's the way it should be. But I think there will be a breed of investors in this country that will pursue investing in science and tech. And we've been doing this for 8 years now, and every year seems like couldn't have been better. From policy or from entrepreneurs or from some other framework. So I think it's a great time to be doing this. Like I said, again, we've been doing this for 18 years. The first 10 years was pursuing a very generic, broad-based venture strategy at another firm. And for the last 8 years, we've been very focused on science and tech, and every day is more exciting the day before.
What got you to take this step 8 years back?
I think a few factors, definitely. Work did take me to other parts of the world, and particularly Israel. And that sort of fascinated how most people would wake up from bed just to go build out. Right, of course, there's a lot underlying that. They're constantly under threat. And sometimes, as they say, survival is the mother of all invention. So they need to survive, and a lot of their tech comes from that. But there were also some very interesting things just around how their policy frameworks worked, how their innovation frameworks worked that allowed them to do. Sort of came back heavy-hearted to say that some parts of this we can do in India. We can't do everything. We don't have to compete on everything. That was one. And then when you go back in history of venture capital from when it started post-World War in North America, most big innovations came out of Stanford and Harvard and MIT.
Yeah.
Now, of course, it may sound half presumptuous to say that we could do that here, but it's not far from the truth. What you could do out of an IIT Madras or an IIT Bombay or an IIT Roorkee, if done well with those frameworks, can create some very meaningful products and some very meaningful technologies. Now, yes, the devil is in the detail on whether you'll make money, whether you're unicorn, all of that. I mean, we all know by now there are enough steps to success that you can fall apart by. But the journey is what matters, right? So I think our view was, hey, back in the day, venture capital really meant was to venture and to do something that hasn't been done before. Again, in literature for venture capital has often been connected to whale hunting, right? You're going into the seas to get something big done, and you're collecting money. And there's literature that's out there that talks about how back in the day when people would go whale hunting, they would go to a group of people and pool in money to get the resources to go whale hunting.
Interesting.
That's sort of what venture capital is, right? You're going to a pool of people, you're collecting money to go create something very meaningful that hasn't been done before, right? And then you want to look for such people who have insights that are able to build something generational that takes 10, 12 years to build, but very meaningful. And that's what they did back then. Of course, they did it at a time where time wasn't questioned. If it took you 2 years to build a product, it took you 2 years to build. It took Srinath 4 years to build a rocket. Yeah, so be it. He built a rocket that worked.
Yeah.
We have a company called Ultraviolet. They sell motorbikes in India and in Europe. We're the only EV company from India that has a certification to sell in Europe. We're possibly among the few automobile companies from India that can sell in Europe, because Europe's up market. Most automotive companies go down market, right? They'd sell in Africa, South America, because you're sort of catering to a generation that's behind you. Now, to cater to a generation above you or ahead of you, supposedly, then you've got to be making something futuristic. It took them 6 years. Their bikes don't catch fire, right? Because it took them 6 years to make a product. But that's sort of what it takes to build something.
Yeah.
And we will steadily develop the patience once we start seeing success.
So, Vishesh, it was also a very conscious decision on your part to say that we will do this kind of investment, which might not necessarily produce unicorns or those large outcomes.
I'm not an engineer, so I actually have a domain in finance. And I was taught back when I did my training that at the end of the day, when you sell these assets, the buyer also needs to make money.
Yeah.
Right? And in the long run, public buys earnings. Now, if I have to work that back from 7, 8 years to where I should be today, I have to invest in a company that's building a product that has to be relevant for 7, 8 years and still make a lot of money in a hyper-competitive world. My analogy is that I've got to be doing something fundamentally different. My moat has to be very strong technically. It can't be a market moat or a capital moat. They don't sustain in the long run. There's always someone who's going to beat you at that game.
Yes.
Right?
And we've seen that.
Yeah, we've seen that time and again in the last 15 years in this country.
Yes.
And therefore, our understanding was, okay, let's invest in capital mode, in technology mode. We can't fight the capital game. We're a small fund. We'll never fight the capital game. We'll fight the technology game. So we'll take risk when the returns are non-linear. See, at a seed stage, all the risk is on the table, from market risk to team risk to everything under the sun. But there has to be something worthwhile taking that risk for, right?
Yeah.
So that's the framework. When we looked at Srinath and Mohan, there were two people. When we invested in Agnikul Cosmos, this was in 2019.
He told that he went to some, I don't know, hundreds or 400s
Yeah,
investors.
so clearly we've
and
been doing a bad job. They never came to us. But we ended up meeting them at a Thai event, and we'd done some work on the sector already. That sort of got us a foot in the door to understand what they were doing.
Mm.
But one of the things was this was a very meaningful risk to take.
Yeah.
If you get it right, it pays for all the crime, right?
Yeah.
It pays for all your mistakes.
Yeah.
The other school of thought, and I think we're in our 8th year, so we've developed this maturity now to say that you will lose, right? And it's okay sometimes to lose. But the odds when you get it right, and the impact of that is so meaningful that you have to go through this win-lose episode. We can't shy away from it. We're fortunate we haven't lost yet, but I always qualify by saying we haven't lost yet. We're still fighting. As famously, Vinod Khosla talks about this. He gives this very extreme saying that the odds of getting 5% right and changing humanity is just so valuable that it's worth taking that risk.
Take us through that decision making, because that also requires investment. That also requires something is so clearly working for you and then investing into future.
We are more or less like banking SaaS, right? Like we spoke about SaaS yesterday. SaaS in its traditional form is going to be challenged. It's already challenged to a large extent. SaaS specifically in conversational use cases are already challenged by conversational AI, Gen AI. Generally is challenging the whole use case of what IVR does, what a chatbot does. Is already like you are seeing. We are able to see the result of what a conversational AI can do to a chatbot SaaS company, right? They are getting obsolete real quick. Similarly, what we think is like banking will probably be the last use case to generally be adapting to a certain tech advancement. So it is only a matter of time when the whole banking SaaS industry, while it's not a big industry yet, banking is generally on a license kind of a model where people develop software, deploy it on-prem in a bank, and the bank is happy with it like for 5 to 10 years. But banking is also evolving fast, very fast, which means the economic buyer in the bank is looking for new avenues of revenues like once every 2 years or 3 years, which means there has to be advancements in the tech that is actually bringing in those revenues. Okay, gone are the days where banking was largely about branch-led, where you deploy a branch where there are enough merchants. No, that's not the game anymore, at least in India or any developing market. The game around how banks make money is like moving away from the regular assets and liabilities structure. It has gone the alternate channels, as we say, on very, very parallel revenue streams are really picking up because there is enough technology intervention in those areas. So which means SaaS is going to be challenged, and banking SaaS is going to eventually get challenged, like if not now, probably a couple of years later. Which means like any of what we do, like every technology that we have built, it has taken easily 2 to 3 years for it to attain, move away from the build phase to the commercialization phase and then to the scaled phase. Generally, every platform or product goes through these phases. When you're building, you're actually iterating and trying, chopping and changing, doing trial and error. But then in the commercialization phase, you figure out how to monetize it, who are the customers, what are the different type of personas that you can attend to and all that. And then once you identify the sweet spot, you just nail on it, and then it hits that scale, right? So we have seen enough use cases of fintechs doing that. Fintechs is bringing the distribution or attending to the distribution challenge in a bank, because banks are generally, their distribution channels are roughly around the DSAs and the branches that they operate. But fintechs generally take a social media route or an Instagram specific route to acquire customers. Similarly, we think like if a couple of years later, if somebody is going to question the way banking use cases are actually delivered, then the software that is actually yielding to the delivery has to also be really nimble. So we are actually working it backwards. If in 2028 this is what is required, we need to start working on it in 2025. And then we have to sell, and then the banks have to adapt it, and then it actually goes to the customer. So we have to work in like really backwards, right? So this question around how will we actually meaningfully use AI in banking is not to be like a strap-on. I took the example of Teams or Zoom, right? Like attaching AI on top of Teams, like Copilot on top of PowerPoint, Copilot on top of Teams, is like a strap-on. In banking, that strap-on structure will work probably for conversational stuff like customer service or very, very conversational stuff. It is easy. But for when a transaction is happening, for the system to actually sniff and tell the user in real time that, hey, what you're attempting to do is probably a fraudulent merchant. There have been a lot of chargebacks and disputes in this merchant. Do you really want to continue? That nimbleness for AI to catch up, it requires a lot of data, it requires a lot of training. And it is not like we deploy today and it starts working tomorrow. It's going to get better over time, which takes those 2 years. That patience has to be shown here for us to get there. So we thought we cannot actually look at AI as a strap-on. We have to really rethink how data is collected, data is harnessed, and how is data leading to meaningful intelligence built over time, right? So that's the foundational thing that we are doing. What we are investing now is like, if there is a core banking system, yes, M2B does have a core banking system. Is the core banking system really intelligent? The answer is no. It's a simple ledger. But how can I make the core banking system collect data, retain data, and actually process data in a certain manner that it makes the intelligence systems to actually dip into the data in real, what do you call, like efficient manner? That's where our game is. Like, so we are thinking bottom up and looking at building stuff which will actually make it easier for systems and providers of applications to easily come up with, let's say, personal finance management. Is your mobile banking app today telling you what are the stocks to go and invest, or what are the various things that you can do between SIPs to mutual funds to FDs to regular deposit schemes? Is it really nudging you to do it? Is it really pushing you to save money? Is it really pushing you to actually save on tax? The answer is no. It is doing here and there, but holistically the answer is no. Can we get there in 2 years? Yes, but the data has to be in a single place.
Thinking ahead, building for the future, that requires a culture within the company, a mindset,
Absolutely.
and investment, patience, and foresightedness. How have you cultivated
Absolutely.
this?
It goes back to the same R&D thing that I spoke about in the earlier part of this interview, right? Like, we have to actually spend a minimum of 10 to 20% of our resources should be working on something that is like easily 6 to 8 quarters away from now.
So you thought of it very early on?
Yeah. So that's what we've always been doing. Like back in 2016, when we were probably like a 15-member team, at least 4 or 5 members were working on building the foundational layers for our tech, while we were using somebody else's tech to pay our salaries. So that mindset has always been there with us. Like, we cannot rest on our laurels and say, hey, we are, like, even if I don't attend office for like a month, the company will still run. There's no nothing to be proud in that. Yes.
So maybe there's another dimension to it, which of course he's not stating obviously, is just the humility.
Yeah.
If you're humble enough to realize that you've got to watch out for day after tomorrow, you're going to build for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good point. Yes.
Which I think, and having known them more personally, I think they've been extremely grounded all the way through. Of course, no reason to not be so, but that helps. I think that plays into how you build a business.
Somewhere I think that should be such a central part of business conversations, humility.
Yeah, I think somewhere in other parts of the world, just given that they've seen this more often, they talk about it more openly than here.
Yeah.
Thanks for adding that. Yes, absolutely. So we think like the life cycles of a product is actually diminishing. Like what we saw as like 7 years, 10 years life cycle for banking products, it's probably now at about 4 years or 5 years, and it is going to get even shorter.
Yeah.
Which means like whatever we is paying our revenues in 2024 will probably be extinct by 2028. Which means we must really innovate, and it's not just to innovate, right? It is also to be very true to yourself that what you're doing is going to be meaningful. And sometimes what will happen is, like as he said, it has to be tolerant with failure. There are certain banks who are actually, and fintechs who are ready to experiment certain things, and we would at least get to know what is not working. Whether we find what is working in the long term is okay. It's a byproduct, but we'll definitely be able to find things that will actually not work in doing more R&D.
What will AI mean for us? And I'm talking more in terms of India. What would it mean? And everyone who's watching us, what should they be ready or prepared with?
So I think the story is far from done. And I think DeepSeek has made that extremely clear. That there's no one winner. And while a few of the countries do have a head start, it's not far away for you to not catch up. I think that's the big blessing. I'm a trained optimist. You're always taught to look at a brighter side of something. I think the brighter side of AI is clearly, it's going to force all of us to be more productive, more intelligent than we are. It's another dear colleague of mine that said we should be using AI to increase our average IQ by 20, 30 points at the minimum. From writing your emails to, parsing through a lot of information. Some of that will play out. I think, and again, I don't think we should get caught into how to create value at every level. As long as it's having a positive impact on increasing overall productivity of the workforce across the board, that's a big win. And there will be nuances. And I know people are talking about building country-specific models or language-specific models. And all of these in the next 5 years to 10 years will percolate down to just day-to-day use cases. And day-to-day use cases where you will take it for granted that something is a lot more productive, that you have information more readily available for you to decide on things. And if everybody has that, then I think it's just going to improve productivity overall.
This AI world initially would require a lot of capital.
AI, so I read this very interesting forward. A lady said, I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can focus on literature and writing. But today AI is actually doing literature and writing and I am ending up doing only laundry and dishes. Right? So it is only a matter of time this flips as it gets over to IoT and various other use cases. I think AI will definitely catch up. As he said, we are only like scratching the surface so far. And in India, it's not like we don't have the capability. It's just that a combination of it's like a trinity, right? We need to have infrastructure. For infrastructure, you need to have investments, and then for investments, you need to create budget out of something. And there has to be some what you call like federal sponsorship of sorts where you can do this and there is enough subsidy for this and stuff like that. So I think all of these things are actually coming along quite well. And I heard the Union IT Minister saying by end of this year, we'll be coming up with our own farm of GPUs, which will actually make training faster. So as you train or invest in more training, that's when you'll actually get more intelligence. And there is no shortcut to it. So I think we are making, so as I said, in US and China, the investment started in 2015 and by 2020 it solidified. Okay, and they have a solid invested base on top of which they are training models. For us, it has started only about 2-3 years ago, and only now it is getting solidified. Good part is our advent is not going to be like as long as it took for them. It's going to be faster because there are enough learnings and there are enough faults that are provided in the other systems which we are already aware of. So we will not go to those places. We'll try newer avenues and stuff, which means our cycle is not going to take that long. Like a 10-year horizon is not what we are looking at. We are probably 2 years away, 3 years away from generating some of this. And as he said, we don't need to necessarily build something that is India specific. What we can actually do is we can look at use cases which are India specific and build in reverse, right? Like attend to a certain use case. How do we work backwards and actually attain what is required? So that's something that we can definitely try. And you spoke about capital. That is key. Most companies, like, we'll have to figure out how do we actually invest. That's key. Otherwise, like, none of these things are going to be meaningful. So I think capital is a big question.
I don't want to compare, but unlike the services economy where you could do with a lot of hustle and work and manpower, this will require investment in infrastructure, investment in capabilities, trainings. So how are you looking at this?
This will require the nation coming together saying we need to get this done.
Yeah.
It's going to have to come from top down and bottom up. both. And I think they're talking about the AI mission and the policy, and that has to put out capital for infrastructure, right? And that's the only way. And this has to be long term. Some of this has to be funded by taxpayer money, because you're building competency as a country, right? We're no longer talking about competency as a company.
Yeah.
You're building core competency as a country. You've got to pay it forward.
Yeah.
Other countries we know have done that. There are stories of how our neighbors have put money 10 years ago, 15 years ago in solar, in semiconductor, in EV. There's no holding back for us now.
Yeah. And here, to the point which both of you are making, here we have to think a little long term.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No
And it's
two
a
ways
great
about it.
starting point to start thinking long term after this for everything.
Yeah. Prabhu, today if I'm an engineer passing out, how should I be looking at my career?
See, what I have seen, at least in the last 20 years since I've had a career for myself, what I was able to notice is that raw engineers were able to flourish 20 years ago, and that that phenomenon of being raw alone was enough is not applicable anymore. You need to be smart. You as an engineer, and definitely kids are getting smarter every day. But what I'm saying is, like, kids who are passing out of colleges today and they are ready to get onto the engineering wagon, what they need to be is actually they need to play the cards. Like, they need to be really smart about what cards they want to kind of play. It's not enough if you're a good programmer. You need to know, like, say for instance, there are new job descriptions that are created now. You need to be a prompt engineer. Not enough if you are just a good software engineer. You need to be a good prompt engineer, because many of the boilerplate coding stuff is now done by AI, which means you can actually be very, very efficient. You can do 10 people's work as a single person, but just by leveraging and harnessing the power of AI properly. You need to know what question to ask. Like 20 years ago, if you remember, when Google happened, everybody said it's not like you cannot find data. You need to know what to ask, right? Similarly, you need to know what to prompt today as an engineer. That's one key thing. The second is, people think AI will come and actually replace jobs and stuff. No, it will actually make jobs more efficient and more productive. And we need to actually use it to the full advantage. We should not be bogged down by, hey, this job is gone. This is like going to be taken over by AI. No, I would say, just because you have a hammer doesn't mean like a construction can be done.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's a tool. So we need to actually leave it at that. We need to treat it as a tool, and still the intelligence part or the creativity part should be left to humans. And we need to actually focus on that. We are not investing enough time on improving our creativity and innovative, thinking, right? So that's like design thinking, for instance, is very important in a product build. Even before the product takes shape, you need to actually think of its design and its final form and stuff. At least the framework level design has to be really imbibed into our thinking, which is not the case today with most freshers. It takes 2 to 3 years for them to actually get on board with the industry that they are going to engineer for, which has to come down. So that's why I said, like yesterday we spoke about grassroots thinking. Like, we need to have courses like, say for instance, rocketry. We need to have enough engineering colleges actually building engineers who will be ready for working in a rocketry industry, or in a fintech industry, or in a, let's say, like a flight industry. There are not enough universities that are actually focusing on specific domain specific courses, which again is very important. Unless we invest in grassroots level, we are not going to get the outcome suddenly. Within the 4 years of graduation, they are not going to really get better.
And that is a worry if it is not addressed. Right. In your fund, how are you looking at AI investments?
I think one, AI cuts across
everything,
many sectors,
Yeah.
right? And I'll give you one example of where we think AI, or what excites us when we talk about AI and AI's applications. We met a team out of C-Camp in Bangalore. Founders were previously heading AI at Philips. Another group was running R&D at Glenmark. They basically came together to say, how do we solve the problem for drug discovery? And they picked up a category called rare and neglected diseases. These are diseases such as muscular dystrophy or inflammation, which your top pharma companies don't focus.
Yeah.
Because they would affect 200 million people in the world, but they would affect kids for most.
Yeah.
and things like that. So they said, why don't we look at something like that? And how do we make this drug discovery faster? And how do you increase the odds of it? How do you reduce the cost of drug discovery? There's enough published literature that shows that the time to discover drugs is only getting longer and longer and more expensive. Very counterintuitive, right? Because you think if humanity is getting smarter, it should be quicker.
Yeah.
But it's the other end. It's getting longer. Of course, there's regulation, there's politics, and all of that that comes in as well. And keeping that aside, it's still taking longer. So this is a group that's essentially taking AI to cut through the drug discovery process and saying, how do I reduce the time to come up with drugs, and how do I increase the probability of getting drugs for rare and neglected diseases? Very happy to say that it's just been under a year, and they've already managed to churn out very critical IP and out-license it to a large pharma company.
Wow.
They've kept it under wraps, but they're
You've
already
invested in that?
We've invested in them. It's a company called Peptris, Peptris AI. But they're using drug discovery to essentially save humanity. That's the extent at which AI can go. And that's why it's nation building. It's not just app building or company building.
You said you meet so many amazing
Yeah.
companies, and somehow I just think, why are people not investing in these companies?
I think it'll only get better. I think often in our industry, success breeds success. And in most cases, you need a few people to do well for the rest of us to
You
believe
have to
this is-
succeed a lot also, by the way.
They have to succeed a lot. And as a result, more of them will come.
This company called MindGrow, right? Like they are investing in chip making, which is something that we are not doing enough as a country.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is another company of ours called MindGrow, and they were showcasing yesterday at a RISC-V symposium. They're making secure chips. So anything in this country that's taking fingerprints or that's taking image, we are increasingly more careful whose chip is inside. Increasingly more careful. And only to realize that we don't have our chips inside because we don't have our cores, right? You've always used an Intel core or an ARM core, and you've built some systems from China on top of that. And I think it's been a decade-old program. It's called the Shakti program at IIT Madras. And the current director, Professor Kamkoti, was the pioneer that started off the Shakti program, which essentially said they will make a core from an open source architecture, by its very nature making it secure. Founders of the company were students of Professor Kamkoti that are now building application layers on core. So the first chip, and of course they're among the few successful semiconductor companies that have had a tape out. They've taped out the first chip earlier last year. Now they're building applications on top of it. They had some very nice demos yesterday, one of which was a secure lock, which is obvious. Another one was a printer. They had a small camera that could take a photo and just print it for them.
Wow.
Wow. So they're of course, it's early, but they're still building some nation building products, right? How do you make
this is our chip, India made.
The fab is still in Taiwan at the moment till the Tata set up their fabs and all of that. But it's great. We've designed the chip end to end and used another fab to make it, which is fine. That's like saying it's my design, but I've used somebody else's Xerox machine to print it, which is okay. Which is totally okay.
Yeah.
Right. But the fact that you've inherently done something ground up, the IP is yours to the extent it is a great place to be.
Because you said chips were always Intel, no?
The Intel and the ARM part of it was okay, but you just had a bunch of other subsystems coming in from other places.
Yeah.
And if you're putting your Aadhaar credentials or your face recognition, then you have to start becoming conscious, because now you're dealing with a metadata which needs to be secure.
For all you know, NVIDIA, they don't have their own fabrication. They use TSMC and Global Foundries
of course.
and stuff, right? Like, so which is okay. There's only there
are very few that have a captive foundry, and you need to be at that scale to be able to do that. But for most of us, we use TSMC.
This is so big, right? In a country, like to the question we started, are we a product nation?
Yes.
With this, it feels like that we are
we're definitely getting started.
there.
We're a large nation. We have to also realize that. Right?
Yes.
We're a large nation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we'll take time to be a large product nation, but in parts, we definitely are.
Yeah. And this is such a clear signal of that.
Absolutely.
AI will be specific sector. You can't look at it in a very generalized way. It will be sector-specific innovations, sector-specific solutions. Tell us about that.
So if you take sector by sector, right, like the AI application that Vishesh spoke about specifically in healthcare or in biotechnology is very different. Over there, LLMs really doesn't matter much. It is all about image recognition and finding, specific anomalies in certain patterns it's largely related to image and like basically microscopic details and stuff, right? It is very different. It's a different kind of intelligence that we need to build, and a very generic LLM is not going to be of super help there in such industries. In conversational SaaS and stuff like chatbots and stuff, of course, like Gen AI and conversational AI is able to help. In anything related to media, of course, like the Soras of the world, definitely is like challenging how it is actually rendered and delivered to the customer. Like the whole graphic industry in let's say Hollywood spends like billions and billions of dollars in just graphic, just visual effects, right? So all of those industries require very different types of investments into AI, and like it's not just understanding and intelligence, it's also about generation, the generative capabilities with a certain cost in mind. Whereas for banking it is very different. For banking it is all about accuracy. How are you able to detect anomalies in fraud kind of situations? In underwriting, for instance, how can a like in lending, it is all about how well can a bank or a financial institution collect money efficiently. That's the whole thesis behind underwriting. What are the various data points can I touch upon to ensure that if I lend this money to this certain individual, he or she will pay it back on time? So that is like getting better and better. For it to get better, we need to assess more data sets, more patterns. And with every demographic difference, like India is like Europe in terms of setup, right? Like 100 kilometers north of Chennai, you get to Andhra. It is a different language, different cuisine, very different mindset of people.
Not even 100 kilometers.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So you need to have that like configurability in terms of what is required in a certain demographic region. So all of these configurability will be very important in a banking kind of an AI setup. So these are the differences in, like I would say, when it comes to industry by industry, these are the factors that we need to bake in the build. Right? It is not just about, okay, we'll generate India specific model and every AI company will be able to build on top of it. No, it will probably give them a good start, but they need to actually go deeper. It's always like the always when a platform is built, should you go broader or deeper? That's the question for every inventor of a platform. You go broader and broader, you are not actually deep enough for some use cases, and you go deeper, you are not broad enough for application into several use cases. So it is always a balance that you need to hit.
Do you think in the AI world both would be essential?
It would be.
Yeah.
It would be. And intelligence, as the name suggests, it will only get better with depth.
Yeah.
There is no two ways about it.
Yeah.
It needs to learn more. It needs to be presented with more data for it to understand more.
Yeah.
So there is no other way to learn.
Yeah.
You need to be presented with data. So it's always depth that matters in specific industries. So it is, as he said, we are just getting started. It's like a journey. We probably are late to the party, but definitely we are catching up. So, and the pace at which we catch up will be fast. That's for sure. We are very optimistic about it.
You've set up a team in US.
Yes. So we wanted to set up this specific center of excellence back in the US because we found a very good leader who has been in these companies. He has worked in companies like ChargeBee as well. So we thought him leading this team would be ideal because he is closer to the Bay Area and Texas. He can actually, talk to more people in the industry. And this is like, we are very conversational about, we have absolutely no inhibition about talking to our competitors or talking to people who are building stuff similar to us. We can at least exchange notes on where we failed.
Yeah.
So that's about it. Like we are very happy to, there is no trade secrets here. It's just that who is able to execute better is what is important.
Who has more and more intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, like intelligence will come over time, but execution is like all about being disciplined and being very focused on what you want to do. And sometimes we get distracted. Like for instance, in our business,
I don't think so. You get distracted, Prabhu.
We do. We have done, like we have burnt our fingers enough. So we are now very particular that we wouldn't want to kind of veer away from what we are doing. Like many people have asked, like, why don't you actually enable some insurtech use cases? We have stayed away from it. There are enough insurtech companies, great companies that are built out of India who can actually do it. We don't want to kind of touch something that we are not really good at. So we are trying to limit our distractions, but it is a world where we can be super distracted. So we want to kind of stay away from that.
You said that For 2 years, it required 2 years of putting your head down and building and not doing anything. Just staying put and building it out. That in itself, it sounds like, oh, it's just 2 years. But 2 years for startups and founders, just doing that requires a very different
it's a
orientation.
different kind of it's a different kind of mindset, and we should not always look at the outcome. Like I am a big fan of Dhoni's process mindset. Even in cricket, in Indian cricket kind of pressure, he was able to apply process. He believed in the process more than anything. Like there's a fitness regime, there is a practice regime. Keep doing that, you will actually get outcome later. And he was not really bothered about the outcome, whether we win or lose. I think that's the same mindset we need to apply. We need to keep doing or going through those hard yards, putting those hard yards. Because sometimes in a build phase, right, like what you built over 2 years will suddenly not be valid, because there are regulatory changes, there are industry level changes, very, very macroeconomic functions that actually challenge certain things. What if we try to expand into Ukraine and Russia and suddenly there is a war? We cannot do. It would have taken us 1 year to kind of get that expansion done, right? Like it's something that's out of our control. It's not in your control. So we need to be mindful that like whatever we put as an effort is meaningful. We are true to it. So that's what we apply in our business and whatever we build. Like I think even in AI, if you browse through our whole website, you will not find much about we using AI and ML jargons much, because we don't really have products at scale that at least like I have a threshold of at least 5 or 6 customers using our products at scale. That's when we will actually list it as a use case in our website. So we need to have that, suddenly saying like, I don't want anything that is just gas, where, we talk about it, but we don't do it. No, we should actually inverse it.
I'm actually becoming your fan. You are very humble and grounded. And I wish all entrepreneurs are like that, right? And stay because this is not your starting phase. You have been in the business now for last 10 years and staying that same mindset.
No, there are enough and more examples that we see. Like say for instance, like Vishesh, I'm a big fan of his work, and
now we are having a Karan Johar moment.
Honestly, the kind of I have met several VCs, but the difference that I find in Speciale is mainly that they don't just invest just because they see an opportunity. He has actually flew to the US to understand about space technology before he even made the investment, right? You flew to NASA, understood what they did. Not many investors actually make that, right? Like they probably go for a EY or a McKinsey report, understand it, come with a thesis, and then
see who all have invested in this.
VC industry largely runs on FOMO.
Yeah,
right? I'm definitely like many people will get offended by it, but I'm saying that's the reality.
That's a fact,
right? I have not seen FOMO in him. So there
are look like a FOMO guy. It looks a little chilled out also.
Camouflaging quite a bit, I guess.
So it's also to do with our bringing up, like in Chennai or in Tamil Nadu. If like we are,
you had to bring Chennai and Tamil Nadu in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I just think it's a grounding upbringing, right? That value system which we as middle class people grow up with, somewhere we lose it when we see money or exposure or attention.
Right.
You've not. And you've not.
I think the trick is to always look for someone who hasn't and try and keep up with them.
Yeah.
You have to find a peer group.
What a brilliant thing to say.
You have to find a peer group that's better than you.
Who are the people you look up to?
I think Madhu and Prabhu are clearly on that list. There's some very old industries in this part of town. There's the Murugappa group. There's a gentleman there called M.M. Murugappan, to whom I look up to quite a bit. These are all people who've created value but still want to give back to society. These are things that you have to learn. Of course, you have to create wealth, you have to grow, you have to create jobs. But there are other things as well beyond that. Now, we need to attain that to then see. You need to attain the summit to then see what it means to be there and what you can do being there.
Yeah.
And it's a process. I think I'm very happy to see many of them go through that journey very well.
Deep tech, we use this word very often. What does deep tech actually mean according to you?
Well, there's a large definition we put in our report, so we'll keep that aside for now. But I think it's about creating things that don't exist, that takes time to create, right? And oftentimes, they don't exist because something has changed in the industry. Something new has come up, which is altering the status quo. The obvious one is AI, but let's go back to Srinath and Agnikul, right? Their whole view was that they'll make a rocket in a week, while status quo is 4 months.
Yeah.
And you're able to do that because you're 3D printing an entire rocket engine.
Yeah.
And 3D printing metal is not a 30-year-old phenomenon. It's a less than 10-year-old phenomenon. We'll talk about another company called Anubal Fusion. They're building nuclear reactors. They're not using uranium. They're not toxic. They're using proton-boron, which again, literature shows you can do it. Has never been done before because it needed lasers that were very powerful. Powerful lasers of that time didn't exist 5 years ago. So now it's about the intertwining of multiple streams of science whose timing is now to deliver something meaningful. Let's take electric vehicles. Electric vehicles have been there for 20 years. They were on lead acid batteries. They were not good enough to give you a good consumer experience, so they never took off. And now when lithium came, the timing is now.
Yeah.
Very similar for aviation. We have a company called E-Plane Company. They build electric planes for up to 200 kilometers with 3 passengers. Aviation's been around since the Wright brothers invented the plane, right? But electric aviation as a concept needed a certain kind of batteries to take off and certain kind of propellers to take off, whose timing is now. So oftentimes, you're looking for people who are able to put multiple streams of science to make something that otherwise can't exist.
Who imagine what is not there. Imagine.
Yeah, it's unlimited.
Imagination.
There's just a lot you can do.
Yeah.
But it needs a very different approach to doing this. And I think we're just very fortunate. We've been among 20, 30 plus founders who do this for a living. So we're imbibing from them as against them imbibing from us.
Is this innate capability that you have, is like as an entrepreneur, as a person, to think, imagine what is not there, or this can be trained?
It can be trained, absolutely. I think most things in life is about discipline. And sometimes luck plays a big hand for us, for sure. But most times it's about taking the right meeting with the right attitude to say, why can't you do this? As against why you can't do this.
Yeah. Few rapid fire questions I'll ask. What's one thing that you feel technology will not change?
Empathy.
Absolutely. I think he nailed it. So that's something that technology will not change. I think there are several human elements which definitely technology cannot imbibe or change. Like it's got to do with the whole upbringing and the feeling or the sentiments and stuff, which definitely technology cannot change.
Yeah,
I think so.
Your view on
human in the loop. The importance of a human in the loop is because even in AI, most use cases, there is a human in the loop element. That's because humans can take better decisions.
Do you think empathy can also be trained?
Very hard.
Ridiculously hard for humans without AI. Yeah. With AI is even harder.
Absolutely.
That's Absolutely. The best line. Failure. How do you look at failure?
I think it's part of the process. I don't think it's worth dwelling upon.
I'd like to quote Mrs. Narayanamurthy here. She said, regret is worse than failure.
Yeah.
So I would say said. Failure is like, it's okay. It's
so
okay
to
accept failure.
Yeah.
But regret is even worse.
Yeah.
So failure is much better.
Chennai.
It's very quiet. It's nice.
It doesn't have distraction.
It allows you to think more deeply about your actions.
Yeah.
That's a big benefit for me.
I feel like Chennai or Madras, as we like to call it, is value conscious.
Yeah.
It's very value conscious. We build values, not really bother about money all the time. So yeah, that's my take of it.
Well said.
Yeah. What keeps you hopeful and excited about India?
Everything. We're still a young nation. Our independence is less than 100 years, which gets a lot more to do. I think we've been a nation of repute. People look at us with trust and respect in the geopolitical stadium, and going to be in a better time to now build things globally from here.
Absolutely. I'm very optimistic. We are very long on India. I think the whole country is actually, it's not just us or specific individuals. I think we are a big proportion of humble people. and very deep thinkers. So that's something that makes me be very optimistic about India. And the culture is like a very important thing. Like despite having diverse cultures, we are able to actually be united and make progress. It's not easy. We've seen several countries where things within the same race or culture and stuff, it's still tough for them. We have been able to make real good progress, like very, very meaningful progress. So that's something that I'm very optimistic about, and that's the strength of India as well.
What's that one big dream that you are dreaming?
Our vision was originally make financial services accessible across the globe, something like that. I made it universally accessible because I think we are very close to being an interplanetary species, right? I want our technology to be used somewhere. We want to be part of that whole story. When ISRO sends a rocket to Mars or farther, we definitely want to play a part in it, and it is possible. At least in my lifetime, it is possible. So that is like really gives us goosebumps. And say for instance, whether it is a like when Elon Musk builds a colony in Mars, definitely there will be trade happening, and we can have fintech happen there. So make fintech interplanetary is something that I would call as like my wild dream, but yeah, it is possible.
Oh, it'll
Prabhu,
happen
I'm
for
your
sure.
fan.
Yeah,
It'll
I'm
happen
your
for
fan.
sure.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
can say
for
with
sure.
a lot of confidence.
Yeah. See,
Yeah.
we have a and
I'm
I'm a fan.
I'm a believer. You have a believer in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the hat that I wear, the dream is always to find something that hasn't been found. And I think there's always a pursuit. We found a team that can build rockets. We found a team that can build planes. We are now working with a team that will build nuclear reactors. I think the future is just so much to unfold. I think that's the chase.
and you'll always be dreaming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. This
Oh,
is so
pleasure.
wonderful. Thank you. Just love this conversation. I hope everyone finds a lot of value in this. Thank you.